My name is Lola, and I am 58 years old. I want to tell you about the Sunday my only child taught me the hardest lesson I have ever learned, and how I found my voice long after I thought my life was set in its quiet, gentle ways. It all started with an invitation to brunch, an invitation that felt like an olive branch at the time. My son Julian and his fiancée Genevieve asked me to meet them at a new bistro in town. I was so pleased. I thought it was a sweet gesture, a way to include me. I should have known by the way Genevieve always eyed my property, that quiet carriage house in the back, that her smiles were calculations. But a mother hopes. A mother always hopes. Before I share what happened at that table, which changed everything for me, I would love to know where you are joining me from today. If you have ever felt taken for granted by someone you love, maybe you will understand this journey. If you are new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button. My stories come from a lifetime of learning these hard lessons, and I share them, so perhaps you can find your strength a little sooner than I did. The bistro was all polished concrete and shrill noise. I had dressed carefully, a soft blue blouse, and brought a gift. I had made myself a set of linen napkins monogrammed with a J and G for their new apartment. Julian looked handsome but tense. Genevieve was all sharp angles and a smile that did not reach her eyes. We made small talk over menus filled with words I did not recognize. Then, Genevieve leaned forward, her voice sweet as syrup. "So Lola, we have been thinking about your place. That carriage house is such a unique space. It is really quite wasted as just storage, do not you think?" I felt a small prick of unease. Oh, I like it. It is full of memories. Martin's old gardening tools, Julian's childhood art projects. I have my painting studio out there. I thought maybe one day it could be a guest suite for when you visit, or, for grandchildren. Julian shifted in his seat. "Mom, be realistic. That is prime real estate. We have a vision for it." "A vision?" I asked, my fork pausing over my eggs. "Yes?" Genevieve said, her eyes bright and hard. "It is the perfect spot for a modern pool house. Sleek. It would be incredible for entertaining Julian's clients. Or we could just tear it down and put in a proper patio. The land value alone is significant." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Tear it down. It is part of my home. It has been there for nearly 100 years. I'm not interested in major construction or in being a landlord. Julian's face tightened. "This is exactly what we mean. You are stuck in the past. That land is underutilized. We are thinking of the future, our future. You need to be practical." The word practical felt like a slap. I looked at my son, searching for the boy who used to help me plant tomatoes in the garden behind that very carriage house. I saw a stranger in a tailored shirt. "Why did you really invite me here today, Julian?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. The silence at our table became a wall. Genevieve looked at Julian, that same small, dismissive smirk playing on her lips. He would not meet my eyes. He stared at his water glass. "Look, Mom," he said, each word measured and cold. "We are just being polite, including you in these conversations. Do not think you matter in the actual decision-making. It is our future. We are just humoring you." The noise of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. I watched his mouth form the words, saw the finality in his eyes. Humoring me. I did not matter. I looked from his dismissive face to Genevieve's smug one, and something inside me, something maternal and soft, snapped clean in two. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I picked up my glass of iced tea, took one long, deliberate sip, feeling the cold liquid trace a path down my throat. I placed the glass down exactly in the center of its coaster. I looked at both of them. "I see. Thank you for the clarity." I stood up, gathered my purse, and left the monogrammed napkins sitting neatly beside my unfinished plate. I walked out of that bistro into the blinding Georgia sun, and I did not look back. The drive home was a blur of green oak trees and hot tears I refused to shed. I walked into my house, the home I had shared with Martin, where I had raised Julian, and the silence was different. It was not peaceful. It was hollow. It was the silence of an erased presence. The anger came first, a hot, cleansing fury. How dare he? How dare she? Then it receded, leaving behind a vast, aching plain of grief. This was not just about a hurtful comment. It was a burial. I was grieving the son I thought I had, the man I raised him to be. The future I had quietly pictured with family gatherings and little feet running in the garden evaporated. He did not call. The days ticked by heavy and silent. That silence was his answer, louder than any apology could have been. About a week later, I found myself pulling the key to the carriage house from its hook. I walked across the dewy grass. The morning was beautiful, the air sweet with jasmine, a cruel contrast to the ruin inside me. I unlocked the door and stepped into the dusty, sun-slanted space. Canvases leaned against walls, boxes labeled childhood books and Christmas decor were stacked neatly. Martin's old wooden workbench sat under a window, a film of dust over his tools. I saw it all through new eyes, not with sentimentality, but with a cold, clarifying logic. They saw this as an asset, a thing to be leveraged or demolished. To me, it was a repository of my life, but now their covetousness had poisoned it. If they see it as something to be taken, I thought I must make it untakeable. The thought was a spark in the darkness. It was not just about this building. I sat down on an old trunk, my heart pounding. What else had I left open available, assuming the goodwill of my own child? The memories surfaced slowly like bubbles from a deep well. The credit cards. When Julian was in college, I had added him as an authorized user on 2 of my cards for emergencies. He had never been removed. He had the code to the electronic gate at the end of the driveway. He had a key to the house. The grief began to harden, transforming in the forge of betrayal into something steely and determined. The phrase echoed in my mind, a terrible mantra. Do not think you matter. Well, I would matter. I would matter so much it would change the landscape of my own life. The mother in me wanted to weep. The woman who was left, the one who had just been declared irrelevant, began to make a list. My first stop was Miriam, my financial advisor of 20 years. Her office was calm, all soft carpets and framed prints of sailboats. Miriam, I need to consolidate everything, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I need to remove all authorized users from every account, credit card, anything. I want everything solely in my name. Miriam, a sharp woman with kind eyes behind her glasses, simply nodded. Of course, Lola. She asked no prying questions, just pulled up my files on her large monitor. One by one, we identified the lines of access. The process was clinical efficient. With a few clicks and some forms to sign, the digital tethers were severed. It felt like taking a deep, full breath for the first time in weeks. Next, I drove to my bank. I asked to speak to the manager, a man named Mr. Ellis, who remembered Martin. I explained I wanted to close a specific savings account. It was an old joint account I had opened with Julian when he was a teenager, meant to teach him about money. There was barely $200 in it, but it was a symbol. I wanted it gone. I watched as he printed the closure form. I signed my name with a firm hand, and he handed me a cashier's check for the balance. The weight of that piece of paper was negligible, but the act of closing that account felt monumental. The physical locks came next. I called a locksmith, a burly, quiet man named Hector. I had him rekey every single external lock on the property. The front door, the back door, the garden shed, and both gates. He worked methodically, the sound of his tools, a steady percussion of change. When he finished, he handed me a heavy ring of new, shiny keys. They felt foreign in my palm, cold and definitive. These were my keys, for my locks, on my property. Finally, the gate code. I'm not particularly tech-savvy, but my neighbor Sharon has a teenage son, Ethan. I asked him for help over a plate of chocolate chip cookies. I need to change the code on my gate opener, Ethan, and I need to make sure there are no other devices that can open it. He nodded, mouth full, and within 10 minutes, it was done. The old code, Julian's birthday, was erased. The new one was a random sequence I wrote down and tucked into my safe. I handed Ethan the old, bulky remote opener. Here, give this to your mom as a spare for me, will you? It does not work anymore, but it will save me buying a new one if I lose this one. He grinned, completely unaware he was holding the artifact of my quiet rebellion. Throughout all of this, the guilt tried to whisper, "He is your son. What are you doing?" But then I would hear his voice in the quiet bistro, see Genevieve smirk, and the whisper would die. The silence from his end continued a stark validation. He was not worried about me. He was waiting for me to come around. He did not know the ground had already shifted beneath his feet. With my personal fortress secured, I turned my attention to the heart of the conflict, the carriage house. I decided passive protection was not enough. I would not just lock it away. I would reclaim it, redefine it on my own terms. I wanted to transform their object of desire into a source of my own independence. I called a contractor recommended by my book club friend. Ben arrived in a tidy truck, a man in his 50s with calloused hands and a respectful demeanor. I showed him the space. I do not want to tear it down, Ben. I want to restore it. I want to make it a beautiful, fully independent one-bedroom apartment. Preserve the character, but make it livable. His eyes lit up. He saw the potential in the old heart pine floors and the exposed beams. We walked through talking about where to put a small kitchenette, how to update the plumbing for a modern bathroom while keeping the clawfoot tub, how to add efficient heating and cooling discreetly. For the first time since the brunch, I felt a spark of excitement. This was not their destructive vision. This was my creative one. We decided to call it the Garden Suite. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of samples and decisions. I chose a pale, warm gray for the walls, a countertop that looked like soapstone hardware for the cabinets that echoed the home's original fixtures. I found a local artist to make a stained glass panel for the top of the front door, a design of wisteria vines. Every choice was mine for my taste for my future. Once the renovation was complete, it was stunning. It was a perfect blend of old charm and new comfort. I took photographs myself, the sunlight streaming through the new windows onto the refinished floors. I wrote the listing description carefully, emphasizing the quiet, the private garden entrance, the history. I listed it on a rental site popular with professors and professionals seeking longer-term stays. The applications started coming in. I interviewed a few people, but I knew immediately when I met Arthur. He was a retired literature professor here for a year to write a book on Southern Gothic writers. He was soft-spoken, appreciated the built-in bookshelves Ben had added, and loved the connection to the home's history. He offered to pay 6 months' rent in advance. When we signed the lease in my sunny kitchen, I felt a sense of triumph so profound it was almost peaceful. The carriage house was no longer a point of contention. It was a solved equation. It was a source of income, of connection to a pleasant, respectful tenant, and a testament to my own agency. Almost exactly a month to the day after the brunch, my phone rang. It was Julian. His voice was not concerned. It was irritated. "Mom, what is going on over there?" We drove by, and there is some strange car parked by the carriage house, and the gate was locked. My code did not work. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I had been waiting for this, dreading it, and anticipating it in equal measure. "Why do not you and Genevieve come over, Julian? We can talk in the garden." An hour later, they stood on my back patio. Julian looked annoyed. Genevieve looked tense, her arms crossed. The garden was in full bloom, a riot of color that seemed to mock the tension in the air. "All right, Mom. Explain." Julian started dispensing with any greeting. "Who is that man? Why is there a car there?" I took a slow breath. "I have had the carriage house renovated. I have a tenant, a lovely man named Arthur. He is a professor here for a year. He signed a lease." The color drained from Julian's face, then rushed back in a flush of anger. "You did what?" "Without even telling us, without consulting us. We had plans for that space." "Mom, serious plans. You told me," I said, my voice even and clear, "that I did not matter in the decision-making. You were absolutely right. When it comes to your future, your plans. I do not matter, but when it comes to my home, my property, and my future, I matter completely. I took you at your word." Genevieve finally spoke, her sweet tone now strained and sharp. "Lola, this is so impulsive. That is a major asset. You are not thinking about the family legacy." "It is my legacy," I corrected her gently, "and I am thinking about it very clearly. It is now providing an income for my retirement. It is being preserved, not torn down." Julian sputtered. "What about the credit cards?" "My emergency cards are declined." I streamlined my finances. I nodded. All those old accounts were clutter. Everything is consolidated now. "You are cutting me off your own son." "After everything." His voice rose, full of wounded entitlement. "This is cruel. Over one stupid brunch conversation." I looked at him, my boy now a man vibrating with fury because he could no longer access what he assumed was his. This was not about one conversation, Julian. That conversation was the truth finally spoken out loud. You showed me exactly where I stood. I have simply chosen to stand somewhere else, somewhere that belongs to me. He stared at me speechless for a moment, seeing not his pliable mother, but a woman with a new set of keys and a spine of steel. Genevieve tried to pivot to adopt a conciliatory tone now that the asset was truly gone. "Maybe we can still discuss this, Lola. Perhaps there is a way." "No," I said the word final. "There is no discussion. The carriage house is occupied. The matter is closed. You are welcome to visit me here in my home as my son, but you do not get a vote. You do not get a key, and you certainly do not get to tell me I do not matter." They left shortly after Julian slamming his car door, Genevieve shooting a cold glance back at the house. I stood in the garden, surrounded by the flowers I had planted, the life I had built, and I felt the fracture deep in my soul. It was not a clean victory, it was a necessary amputation. The weeks that followed were a mix of quiet peace and deep, resonant sadness. The estrangement from Julian was a phantom pain, an ache for something that no longer existed. I allowed myself to mourn the relationship I thought we had, the future I had dreamed of. I did not chase him. The ball, as they say, was firmly in his court on the other side of a locked gate. But life in its stubborn way began to fill the new spaces. My tenant, Arthur, proved to be a perfect quiet presence. He would sometimes wave from his little porch as I gardened. Once, he loaned me a book of poetry he thought I would enjoy, leaving it on my back steps with a note. It was a kind, simple interaction with no history and no demands. The rental income was not life-changing, but it was affirming. I used the first month's payment to finally fund a small recurring donation in Martin's name to the botanical gardens where I volunteered. It felt like a circle, closing a way to honor a love that had built me up, not torn me down. My friends, my book club ladies, my volunteering colleagues, they became my chosen family. They asked no probing questions, but their steady presence was a balm. Sharon from next door invited me over for dinner more often. I took a short trip to the coast by myself, something I had always talked about with Martin, but never done alone. I sat on a balcony overlooking the ocean, and the vastness of it made my personal heartache feel both small and significant. Healing was not a straight line. Some mornings I would wake up and the emptiness of the house felt overwhelming. I would wonder if I had been too harsh. But then I would remember the smirk, the calculated words, the utter disregard for my feelings and my autonomy. I had not built a wall out of spite. I had drawn a boundary out of self-respect. The peace I had now was real. It was quiet, and it was entirely mine. So here I am now, months later, sitting in my garden as the evening light turns the sky peach and lavender. The garden suite has a soft light on in the window. Crickets are beginning their song. The lesson I learned is this: love should not require you to erase yourself. It should not demand that you become a supporting character in someone else's story, especially when they write you out of the ending. When someone shows you in clear and painful terms that your value to them is conditional on what you can provide, you have to believe them. The hardest no you will ever say is to someone you love, but sometimes it is the only way to say yes to yourself. I was a mother. My job was to raise a capable, independent adult. I did that. My job was not to become his auxiliary bank, his convenient landlord, or a silent partner in his ambitious plans. I realized I had confused being needed with being valued. He needed my assets. He did not value my heart. I do not hate my son. In a strange way, I pity the man he is choosing to become, the man who lets a woman's avarice poison his relationship with his own mother. But I cannot save him from choices that demean me. My door is not barred out of spite. The lock was changed for my peace. Should he ever find his way back, not with a sense of entitlement, but with genuine remorse and a changed heart, he will have to knock. And I will have to decide in that moment if opening it is worth the disturbance to this hard-won, fragile peace. That finally is a choice where I truly, unequivocally matter. If this story resonated with you, I would be so grateful if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set a heartbreaking boundary with someone you loved? How did you find the strength? Your stories and insights help build a community of support here. If you found value in this, please give this video a like. It lets me know these conversations are important. And if you are not yet subscribed, I invite you to join us. We share stories here about finding our footing later in life, about resilience, and about the quiet power of choosing yourself. Thank you for listening, for being here, and for honoring your own journey. Take care of your heart.